Have you ever felt like someone was watching you, not in a movie, but right inside your own home? Every time you open the door, they just happen to appear. Every small detail of your life, from your daily routines to the things you've never spoken aloud, seems to be in the hands of a stranger. This is no longer innocent curiosity. It's a form of intrusion, quiet, but deeply embedded in every private moment you once thought was safe. We often dismiss our first instinct, afraid we're overthinking it. But that very denial is the crack that lets others slip in. Stoic philosophy does not teach us to react with anger, but with reflection, to observe, to analyze, and to act not out of emotion, but out of reason. In this video, you'll discover 5 clear signs that a neighbor is no longer just an outsider, but a silent presence in your life. And, more importantly, you'll learn how to protect yourself with calm, with strength, and without letting fear take the lead. 1. They know what you never spoke aloud. Some words feel like they were buried within 4 walls. A conversation between you and a loved one in the kitchen. A late-night phone call in the bedroom, whispered so no one would be disturbed. A plan shared with your partner while sitting on the couch. No TV on, no windows open. You believed it was a safe space, private, discreet, shielded from outside eyes. But a few days later, your neighbor casually drops by with a polite smile and asks, "Heard you're planning to quit your job?" Your heart skips. You never posted anything online. You never told anyone in the neighborhood. How do they know? In that moment, every sense of safety in your home feels drained. You start searching your memory. Where did you say it? When? Was your voice too loud? Did you forget to close the window? But no matter the explanation, one truth remains. Someone heard what no one should have heard. And they didn't just hear. They remembered. They brought it up. They brought your privacy into the light. Gently, seemingly by accident, but just enough to trigger a silent alarm in your mind. This isn't harmless interest. It's intrusion masked as friendliness. When someone can repeat exactly what you said in a closed space, that space is no longer closed. It becomes even more concerning when you realize they only repeat what's important. Information that carries weight, that can give them an edge, or simply leave you off balance in your relationships. A Stoic does not react with anger. They do not raise their voice or fall into emotional chaos. Instead, they observe. They change their habits, speaking less near windows, avoiding private topics when devices are on, using white noise to block sound through thin walls. Most of all, they don't doubt themselves just because others say, "You must have imagined it," or "It was probably a coincidence." Because, as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, if it troubles you, it is not insignificant. The feeling of having your private words breached is one of the subtlest kinds of harm. It makes you question your own space. But Stoic philosophy teaches that you can always rebuild your boundaries, not out of fear, but through reason, awareness, and discipline in how you guard yourself. Privacy is not just about what has happened, but also about what you're preparing to do, the plans still in the idea stage, the decisions whispered in confidence, or even the notes you just typed into your phone. And yet somehow, someone outside already knows where you're going, who you'll meet, what you'll do. They don't ask. They don't guess. They say it with calm certainty. "Heard you're going out of town next week. Where to?" A casual question that strikes at the heart of your confusion, because you know, no one was supposed to know that except you and one other person, and that person doesn't live nearby. That moment stops you. You begin to reevaluate everything around you. You wonder, is my life leaking out through devices I thought were harmless? Someone's camera pointing at your living room window, a hidden microphone, or even a strange Wi-Fi network that appears whenever you come home. The intrusion now goes beyond words through thin walls. It may have entered the realm of technology, quiet, precise, and deeply dangerous. The feeling that someone is one step ahead in your own life doesn't just strip away control, it erodes your mental freedom. You no longer plan freely. You begin to hide, to avoid, to hesitate in doing things you once did naturally. And that's when your mental space has been overtaken, not by force, but by creeping fear. Still, the Stoic response is not panic. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If something is beyond your control, there's no use being upset about it." You cannot control others' behavior, but you can absolutely strengthen your own fortress. The first step is to rebuild your safeguards, secure your devices, use strong passwords, set up personal firewalls, inspect your living space for unknown gadgets. You must also shift your routines. Don't discuss important matters near open doors. Don't post schedules on social media, and don't share personal details with people who don't truly need to know. Most importantly, remember that freedom doesn't come from not being watched. It comes from not being ruled by the fear of being watched. When you act with clarity, caution, and emotional discipline, you reclaim your power not only over your plans, but over your entire life. 2. Their technology points toward you. When a neighbor installs surveillance cameras, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. In a modern society, securing one's home is a reasonable act. But the thin line between protection and surveillance often hides behind seemingly harmless actions. You might step into your yard and suddenly feel watched. When you look up, you see a camera mounted on your neighbor's eave, not facing their front door, but aimed directly at your bedroom window, your balcony, or your private living area. You look closer and realize the angle could easily be adjusted. In fact, it's a 360-degree camera capable of recording audio, connecting to the internet, and storing data remotely. So the real question becomes, why is their security device focused on your personal space? The answer doesn't lie in the camera's position, but in the attitude of the one who placed it. Some deliberately redirect the camera to avoid suspicion, while others don't even try to hide it. They leave it fully visible as a quiet reminder that you're always within sight. What's more disturbing is that they always have a reasonable excuse if questioned. "That's just the angle of my house. The technician set it up wrong. It only captures my yard." These justifications make you second-guess yourself. Wonder if you're overreacting or imagining things. But unease is not a trick of the mind. It's a warning signal, something Stoics are trained to recognize. Stoic philosophy does not urge you to respond with anger, but with deliberate action. The first step is to examine the device. Does it have a recording light? Is it actually pointed at your home? Can the angle be changed? If yes, begin to protect your space. Install thicker blackout curtains, grow tall plants to block the view, use reflective one-way window film. All are practical ways to preserve your privacy without confrontation. Sometimes, you should also document the camera's activity. Record video. Take pictures of the device pointed toward your home at different times. Not to provoke, but to prepare in case the matter escalates. And in all your actions, keep your mind calm. True freedom doesn't come from the absence of cameras, but from not letting them control your inner state. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you are awake, no one can harm you without your consent." So, if a lifeless device makes you feel observed, respond not with panic, but with clarity and resolve. That is how a Stoic defends the territory of their mind from silent intrusions. In an age where everything is connected to the internet, intrusion no longer looks like a burglar. It can be an invisible signal slipping through walls, through devices, even through moments you thought were absolutely private. You may simply be sitting in a room, phone resting idle, and it heats up without reason, battery draining fast despite no apps running. Some days, a strange Wi-Fi network shows up the moment you get home, something like camera Nest XX or surveillance of device 3 you've never seen before. One night, your smart speaker turns on unprompted, or your smart lights blink without cause. These oddities, once or twice, can be ignored. But if they repeat precisely when you are present, it's no longer a system glitch. It's a warning. Neighbors don't need to be tech experts to run digital surveillance. With a device bought online and a detailed guide, they can install hidden cameras in mailboxes, motion sensors under the eaves, or even small audio recorders on the fence. Some devices emit Bluetooth signals or spoof Wi-Fi networks, causing your phone to auto-connect if your security settings aren't tight. And when your device behaves strangely, don't be quick to blame the software. Ask yourself, why does this only happen when I'm home? A Stoic doesn't fear the unusual, but they pay attention. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Not everything that happens to you must provoke a reaction. Only what you permit holds weight." When technology begins to whisper in signals, be the first to take note and investigate. You can download apps to scan for hidden Bluetooth devices, audit your network for unfamiliar connections, or monitor the data flow from each device in your home. These simple steps help you regain control in a world where signals are easily manipulated. If you find clear signs, change your Wi-Fi password, reset your internal network, and if needed, switch to devices with stronger encryption. Routinely check power outlets, overlooked items like nightlights, air purifiers, or Bluetooth speakers, because the least suspicious places are often the most exploited for hidden monitoring. The key is not to become paranoid, but never to be careless. Stoic discipline teaches that awareness doesn't mean doubting everything. It means observing deeply enough to miss nothing worth guarding. In the digital age, intrusion may make no sound, but if you listen in stillness, you'll realize it's been there all along. 3. They, coincidentally, appear every time you leave the house. Coincidence is natural in neighborly life. Anyone might bump into each other while taking out the trash, receiving a package, or checking the mailbox. But when those accidental encounters occur at all hours, despite your frequently changing routines, it's no longer a coincidence. It's a sign that deserves serious attention. Imagine you decide to change your habits. Monday morning, you leave at 7 a.m. for a workout, and your neighbor is watering the plants. The next day, you leave earlier, at 6:15, and still see them in the backyard, unlocking their car. On Wednesday, you try something different, waiting until 9 p.m. to go for a walk, thinking no one will be around. But as you open the door, they're tidying the garage, something you've never seen them do at that hour. Over time, you notice, no matter what hour you choose, they always appear during that window, as if they already knew you were about to step outside. This is subtle and hard to detect because technically they've done nothing wrong. They haven't entered your space, called your name, or initiated direct contact. They're just there. But it's precisely that persistent presence, repeated across shifting moments, that unsettles you. It feels like every movement you make is being tracked, every small change in your routine observed from just close enough to monitor, but far enough to deny accountability. A Stoic doesn't rush to conclusions or respond emotionally, but they also don't ignore patterns. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us, we must not disregard what our initial instincts alert us to, for that is reason speaking before emotion clouds it. When someone consistently appears the moment you step outside, even as you vary the timing, it's no longer a matter of overlapping schedules. It's the behavior of someone tracking your routine, consciously or not, and that needs to be seen for what it is. The response is not confrontation, it's observation. Track, when you leave the house, what the neighbor was doing and whether their behavior shifts based on yours. Then try reversing the pattern. Go out at random, irregular hours. If they still appear without clear reason, that's your evidence. You're not just being watched, you're being scheduled into someone else's awareness. And the final lesson Stoics always remember: prolonged discomfort should never be ignored simply because it makes no sound. The most insidious form of surveillance is when someone is present at all times, leaving no obvious trace. They just exist. And repeated presence is a form of mental dominance you should never permit. No one wants to be labeled as nosy. That's why those who intend to observe you will never stand in the open, staring at your door. They'll always be busy, always holding something, sweeping an already clean driveway, wiping down a car that was just washed this morning, or checking an empty mailbox for the third time that day. Each of these actions seems reasonable every day, but what you must focus on is not the action itself, but the timing and how often it's repeated. You leave for work at 7 a.m., and they're on their porch, plucking the one dry leaf left on the fence. You return home at 6 p.m., and they're in the same spot, watering a plant that doesn't need water. At night, you go for a walk, and their porch light flicks on. They're checking the locks, though everything is already closed. None of these behaviors is suspicious enough to call anyone. But when they happen exactly as you appear, again and again, that harmlessness becomes a dangerous disguise. The cunning lies in how they keep themselves within the gray zone of suspicion. They never step onto your property, never say anything blameworthy, never stare openly. But by always choosing your moments of presence to perform their chores, they maintain a constant presence that keeps you from ever truly relaxing. They don't attack, they don't retreat, they make you feel watched, yet unable to prove it. From a Stoic perspective, this is when you must be most alert. Epictetus once said, "When something unsettles you and you can't explain why, that is your cue to observe more closely, not to silently endure." You don't need to confront or accuse, but you do need to acknowledge. Record the behaviors, times, and specific actions. If possible, install your own camera to verify whether these coincidences are happening more often than they should. You might also try reversing the situation. Leave the house at odd hours, like midnight or midday on a weekday. If they still coincidentally stay busy at those times, you'll have critical evidence that this isn't routine, it's intentional presence. And when that presence hides behind harmless behavior, your task isn't to find fault in them, it's to build a wall of awareness strong enough to protect your inner calm. For a Stoic doesn't let themselves be ruled by suspicion, but neither do they live in naivete. Between those two extremes lies the middle path, where you observe, reflect, and act not from fear, but from respect for your own boundaries. 4. They slowly become obsessed. Each of us has a private circle, a space where we decide who may enter and who should remain at the edge. But when a neighbor starts acting as if they've always belonged inside that circle, even though you never invited them, it's no longer friendliness. It's the first quiet sign of an obsession beginning to take root. At first, they ask casually about your work, about a relative who visited, about a trip you've only planned in your mind. You're surprised they know, but you remain polite. Then they begin to offer unsolicited advice. "I noticed your car was parked a little crooked yesterday. Might want to fix that before you get a ticket." Or, That woman who came over yesterday looked upset. Did you two have an argument? Words that appear caring, but are in fact invasive. You never shared your private life with them. You never invited them across the threshold of your personal matters. Yet they behave as if they have the right to know, to intervene, even to accompany. They stand at the fence, watching who comes and goes, memorizing your routines, assuming the role of an invisible guardian, though you never needed one. The feeling begins to unsettle you. You hesitate before inviting anyone over. You pause before going out at night. You start speaking more quietly in your own home, fearing that something said in passing might be heard and later returned to you through some offhand comment. This is no longer care. This is when someone writes themselves into your story without your consent, without your permission. For the Stoic, this is a moment for awareness, not for impulsive reaction. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "No one can intrude upon your mind unless you open the door." But for that very reason, if you let someone linger at the threshold too long without drawing a line, they will assume they've been invited in. What must be done isn't arguing, but closing the gap. Limit interaction. Keep silence when it matters, and be deliberate in what you share, through words, glances, or daily habits. A healthy neighborly relationship is built on respecting space, not on forced presence. When someone begins to act as if they have a role in your private life without your agreement, that's when you must re-establish their place. Not through confrontation, but through clarity in your boundaries. When obsession moves beyond observation, it doesn't stop at glances or idle questions. It begins to interfere, quietly but persistently. The goal is no longer to know what you're doing, it's to shape how you live, indirectly, step by step, until you realize your choices are being shaped by someone who should have no say in your life at all. It may begin with small notes, one left on your door saying, "Saw your window open yesterday, make sure it's shut properly." Then come the seemingly casual remarks. "You got home late last night, thought something might have happened." Or, "There was a stranger at your house this morning. I stayed by the gate for a bit just in case." These actions wear the language of concern, but at their core is a message. They are watching, and they want you to know it. Once they see you don't resist, they push further. They begin to preempt you, showing up where you're headed, asking about plans you never made public, or acting hurt if you don't inform them of something. You leave town for a few days without saying anything, and they complain, "Neighbors should let each other know, just in case." You change where you park, and they immediately comment, "That spot blocks my view." Each act is small, but they share the same aim: to make you feel obligated to adjust so you don't inconvenience them. The danger lies in the moment you start complying. Not because they have the right, but because you want to avoid conflict. You begin notifying them when guests arrive. You change your walking routes. You speak softer inside your own home. You draw the curtains earlier each evening, not by free choice, but because their constant presence has occupied part of your mind. That's when they've succeeded. They don't need force. You've already begun to restrict yourself. Stoic philosophy does not teach us to rage when boundaries are crossed. It teaches us to recognize the boundary itself. Epictetus once said, "You cannot be harmed by what you do not allow." When a neighbor's influence makes you alter your behavior without your consent, you're not only being invaded externally, you are handing over control of your inner space. What you must do is not raise your voice, but sever the invisible dependence. Stop announcing, stop explaining, regain the reins of your private life. When you are once again the sole decider of what you do, when, and why, you reclaim not just your freedom, but the quiet that had been taken from you. Not by noise, but by the subtle intrusion of behavior that seemed too minor to matter. 5. Strange traces around your home. There are things we place in our living space instinctively, almost as unconscious habits. The doormat always slightly tilted to the left, the plant angled to catch the morning sun, the porch chair turned just so to face the fence. These details are small, but for someone who lives in the space daily, they become markers of familiarity, signs that this place is still safe, still intact, still theirs. But what if, one morning, you step outside and see the mat perfectly straightened, almost unnaturally so? The plant turned the opposite way, the chair no longer in its usual spot, and you know you didn't touch any of it. At first, you might reassure yourself. Maybe it was the wind, maybe someone in the house brushed past it, maybe the pets. But if it keeps happening, and especially if it only happens when you're away, you can't help but ask, who came near my door? Who touched the objects that belong solely to my private space? And most importantly, why? Such actions, though they don't cause obvious harm, leave a subtle crack in your sense of security. Because physical intrusion, when done discreetly and deliberately, rarely aims to steal property. Its purpose is to send a message. I can get close to you whenever I choose. This is a form of psychological control used by more calculating observers, not through destruction, but through small changes that linger in your thoughts all day. The Stoic does not respond with panic to such shifts, but they also don't dismiss them. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "No one can make you feel unsafe unless you allow it, but you must not be blind to what deserves your vigilance." In this case, the task is not to suppress worry, but to confirm facts objectively. Photograph the original placement of your belongings. Place small items like a slip of paper, a thread, or tape in door gaps, under cushions or beneath the plant pot. Each time you leave, check if they've moved. Small changes, systematically documented, can become solid proof that someone is approaching your space without permission. You might also install a camera near your front door or porch, not to confront, but to protect the peace that is your rightful domain. Once you have evidence instead of suspicion, your response no longer stems from emotion. You act not out of fear, but out of self-respect. For as the Stoics remind us, safety does not come from the absence of threat, but from not ignoring the truth when it knocks at your door. There is a distinct unease in returning home from a short trip and sensing something is off. You step into a familiar space, but the gate is ajar even though you know you locked it. The doorknob bears faint marks, as if recently handled. The porch shows unfamiliar footprints, or there's a small object on the ground you're certain doesn't belong to you. These signs don't scream, they don't destroy, but they tap gently on your mind. Someone has been here when you were not and left no note. A typical neighbor doesn't approach your house when you're gone. They don't linger by your back fence or walk circles around your porch to keep an eye on things. But when you start noticing quiet changes around your home, a window slightly open despite being shut, a piece of wood shifted on the walkway, or the faint layer of dust wiped from a doorknob, that's when you must admit, someone uninvited has drawn closer to your life. The issue is not the scale of the intrusion, but the fact that it happens when you cannot witness it. Your absence becomes the very condition that allows someone else to inch past your boundaries unnoticed. This is the hallmark of passive surveillance, where there's no conversation, no threat, just silent signals left behind for you to interpret. You're being watched. They never enter your home, yet you feel as if someone already has. A Stoic does not deny the truth out of fear. They face it calmly and act with intention. Epictetus once emphasized, "When you know something threatens you but pretend not to see it, you've become complicit in the danger." In this situation, you need not speculate, but you must acknowledge. Begin with observation and notes. Record every minor change, the time you leave and return, the condition of doors, objects, or unusual traces. If possible, install cameras or motion sensors to determine if someone approached in your absence. You can also use simple alert tools like slips of paper in door cracks or tape across seams, small measures to confirm if something has been moved. Once you have evidence, you're no longer reacting from emotion. You'll know when to increase security, when to speak with other neighbors, and when it's appropriate to notify authorities, because if someone is quietly closing in on your living space without cause, your silence will not protect your peace. Only awareness and timely action can defend the place that was always meant to be your sanctuary. I don't believe that all concern is a threat, but I do believe that once certain boundaries are crossed too many times, they can never return to what they were. When a neighbor knows too much about your life, appears precisely when you leave the house, and interferes through small but repeated actions, it is no longer coincidence. It is a deliberate intrusion disguised as concern. I once believed that silence was the wise response, until I realized that silence itself makes others think they have permission to go further. And that is the greatest lesson. Peace doesn't come from closing your eyes, but from seeing everything clearly, with a calm mind and well-defined boundaries. Because if you don't protect your space, there will always be someone ready to step into it and call it care. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future videos. Remember this: you can't control where others look, but you can absolutely control what you allow into your life. See you in the next video.